What follows is free. But if you want to see the full extent of what we do and get involved, go to patreon.com/wordinyourear. Now, on with the show. So, here we are. Welcome to another Word in Your Attic. And I have to say, we're particularly excited about this because it reunites us with an old colleague and friend. And he is in front of his records there, which for many years we used to go and visit Fraser Lewry and his records in Islington.
For his legendary Christmas party.
For his legendary Christmas parties. But now that record collection, along with its owner, Fraser Lewry, is now where, Fraser?
I'm deep on the South Island of New Zealand.
There you go. It took a long time to get back to New Zealand, isn't it? Which we're going to cover, during this. But those records spent a lot of time in store, didn't they?
Yeah, best part of a year they were in storage before I was able to get them out again.
Did you go and visit them while they were in storage to check they were
Stroke them lovingly. Trying to imagine what they sounded like.
Yes, I did, yeah. I looked forlorn.
Yeah. You keep mentioning that there are penguins near you. Can that really be right? There are penguins?
No, I live about 1 kilometre from a penguin colony.
Are they lost? I mean, surely penguins, don't they like ice and things, or am I out of touch here?
There's plenty of penguins around here. They go out in the morning to fish and they come back at dusk. You can go and watch them because they all troop in at the same time every day.
Oh, amazing.
I did that on New Year's Eve, and I think there was about 300 of them came in. And then they scuttle off to their little burrows and houses.
Oh, well, fantastic.
There's also a big colony of shags who live on a pier, which is even closer to where I live. But the wind in the wrong direction, that really stinks.
I'm sure it does. Very fragrant. Very fishy.
Well, look, if you're watching this, you may well be familiar with Fraser. If you used to spend any time on the Word website and wonder why it appeared to be the only civilized place in the entire World Wide Web, that was all down to the work of Fraser Lewry. He used to tend it night and day, didn't you, Fraser? And only when severely tried did he actually cast anybody into the outer darkness and say, "You're barred." I think you only did it once. Is that right, Fraser?
Once or twice, yeah.
Once or twice.
Yeah.
I can remember vividly. I was watching. Yeah, I can vividly remember you because it was a real success, that website, and almost entirely to do with you actually, and the people who contributed. Obviously, you encouraged them, and I can remember you suddenly saying, "You ought to come and see this." All the Massive, as they were known, are organising a party, and they're all going to meet, and it's in a pub just across the road from the office. But we weren't invited. Do you remember?
Absolutely.
And we thought maybe we should go. And it was fantastic. I can remember that they were all there. They'd never met before. They all had copies of words so they could identify each other. Pencil Squeezer, Drakey Girl, Captain Underpants. And it was very emotional moment to see all these people who'd met through us, actually. It was a big success, wasn't it?
Well, it's all still going on in some shape or form.
It is.
Many years later, really.
Yeah.
And there's one marriage that's come out of that website.
That's
yes,
right.
There have probably been children as a consequence of that website.
Yeah.
So, Fraser, what we traditionally do in these chats is we ask people if they can remember the record-playing machinery in their home when they were a child. Can you?
It was some kind of music system that we had. I can't remember what make it was. It played 3 speeds. It was 33, it was 45, and it was 78.
Right.
And it had one of those arms which meant you could stack the records up and they dropped down.
Absolutely.
And my dad, who was a carpenter, had built it into a bigger cupboard.
Oh, right. He'd made it into a radiogram, effectively, had he?
Very much, yes.
So this was in New Zealand. You were born in New Zealand, is that right?
Born in New Zealand, yeah. So this was the music playing equipment that I grew up with, and it came with us to the UK when I moved when I was 12.
How old were you at 12? Right. So were you buying your first records in New Zealand?
No, I wasn't interested in music at all. I think mainly because my parents had such appalling taste.
What sort of things did they foist upon you?
Well, my dad's taste was the kind of thing you pick up in charity shops. It was James Last CDs, it was marching bands, it was Kenneth McKellar.
Kenneth McKellar.
Yeah, terrible music. My mum liked show tunes and Al Jolson. I think there were 2 pop albums in the house. One was the Beatles Red and Blue collections.
Yeah,
of course.
And Simon and Garfunkel Greatest Hits.
Good work.
This is the standard record collection of millions of people round about Fraser's age. It really is.
Yeah,
the Beatles
everybody had those records.
Simon and Garfunkel's greatest hits. Absolutely, everybody had it. But you came back to England when you were what, 12?
When I was 12, yeah. So my parents were both Londoners and moved out to the New Zealand with £10 Poms. Met up over there, had 2 kids, and eventually came back.
And where were you? Where were you living again?
Well, when we came back to the UK, we were promised London, which I was very much in favour of, and ended up in Northampton, which was a place that I would recommend that nobody ever visit.
Step down.
Apologies to anyone watching. We know
what did you do for entertainment in Northampton?
God forbid. Yeah, I don't remember being entertained by much in Northampton. My ambition was always to escape to London. When I got to the age where I was applying to go to college, I applied to 5 London colleges. I just wanted to go out and be able to go to gigs every night.
Right. So what was your particular enthusiasm in music then as a teenager?
Well, it was very much influenced by my peer group at the time, who I went to. I was involved in a youth club that was attached to a church. So naturally, everyone was into heavy metal.
Black metal.
Yeah. So
That's wonderful.
16, it was Black Sabbath, and it was AC/DC, and it was Iron Maiden, and all that kind of disreputable stuff.
So what was it? It was the first band you went to see? Can you remember?
First band I went to see was Toyah Wilcox.
Oh my goodness.
The Leicester de Montfort Hall in 1982, which would have been around the time of Anthem, I guess.
Was that because you liked her and you'd seen her on Top of the Pops or something, or what took you there?
No, it's because somebody in the sixth form had free tickets, and I think I was the only person who put my hand up. I wasn't a Toyah fan, but I went along, and I remember going right down the front and being terrified when the crowd started moving when she came on, and Toyah reaching out and briefly holding my hand as if to comfort me.
Oh my God!
Quite a moment.
Yeah.
But then it got more metal, did it? Gig going.
My second gig was AC/DC the same year. I think my third gig was Ozzy Osbourne, followed by Rush. Then it was the Reading Festival and Donington and all those kind of things.
Right. And you were growing your hair to go with it, and you have the accompanying uniform.
Yeah. So I started growing my hair when I was 16, I think, and didn't really cut it again until well into my 40s.
Really?
Well, yeah, there are pictures of you where, I mean, it's not actually waist length, but it doesn't look far off. Would that be right?
Far off.
And in ringlets too, isn't it? In kind of ginger ringlets. Look fantastic.
I could almost tuck it into my pants.
But you were also in a band. When does that come in?
Well, I roadied for a band.
Oh, right. Come on.
This was after moving to London, and I gave up my degree course after a year to go and work in a record shop because that seemed like a more sensible thing to do.
Oh, what record shop?
I was at the Record and Tape Exchange.
Oh, yeah, I remember you talking about this. We used to have conversations about just how bullshit the people who worked at Record and Tape Exchange were. They were so difficult to deal with.
Well, it was the only
job. Did you find that?
I never will have, where I could sit at the counter, and not that I ever did this, but I could have done, and sit at the counter with a can of Carlsberg in one hand, a cigarette in the other, and tell a customer to fuck off. Kind of normal.
And be promoted and get a company car.
So this was where? This was in Notting Hill or wherever?
Yeah, this was in Notting Hill and in Camden, and there was another shop in Shepherd's Bush at the time as well.
So isn't it the case that in order to work at the Record and Tape Exchange, you had to pass a kind of knowledge test, didn't you?
There was, but it seemed
you had to have been to college too, I think.
Yeah, you needed to have a degree unless you were going to be a security guard, and I didn't have a degree. I was actually hired as a security guard. I know that's unlikely, but I was.
God.
And my pop quiz was the owner, Brian, pointing at Atom Heart Mother by Pink Floyd and saying, "Who's that by?" And me telling him it was Pink Floyd because there's a cow on the cover.
Yeah, absolutely. It's inscrutable.
Yeah.
And that was enough to get me the job.
Oh, really? Oh, they were obviously desperate. But that was the security guard.
Yeah.
But so you were behind the counter there for how?
It became very apparent very quickly that I was no good as a security guard, so they put me in behind the counter.
Right.
Were you evangelical about? Were you constantly saying to people, "You should listen to this," or "Don't buy this"? Did you ever tell people to try and dissuade people?
I don't think I've ever encouraged my taste on anyone else. I don't think I've ever done that, and certainly not working in a shop. I wouldn't be brave enough to.
I think you're quite right, actually.
Yeah.
Because it's almost always a bad idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
To say to people,
my taste is awful.
Your taste, Fraser, is it's. I've never met anybody with taste like you. That's all I can say. I wouldn't. I'm not going to say it's bad, good, or indifferent. I wouldn't know. Because most of the time you're dealing. You would have records I'd never heard of. Pick out some records from behind you, Fraser, at random. Just pull
out a random record.
Just pull out a random record. Here we go. This will be out of my heart, mother.
This is The Lateness of Dances by His Golden Messenger.
There, you see. Say that again. The Lateness
of Dancers by His Golden Messenger.
His Golden Messenger. Pick another one. Pick another one. Good game. This.
We had a name for this game. Was it Record Roulette? I can't remember.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Record.
Very Green. This is the soundtrack of Utopia, the second soundtrack. They did two.
See,
and that's isn't that the eye you use as an icon on your?
It is.
On your, I think we've just seen that. That's right on your internet. How amazing!
So, with your records, do you have them in? Have you got them all in front of you?
Yes, they're all
behind you. Sorry. Right. Pick out the first one, the top left, and the last one, the bottom right.
All right. So it's the Aardvark to ZZ Top.
It's the Aardvark to ZZ Top test.
Aardvark to John Zorn.
Oh god! Here we go. What's he got? He can't find his way down to the drama. Here we go. Right, what have you got in the A's, Fraser? What's the first one in the A's?
Aardvark.
Aardvark!
Are you kidding?
Aardvark!
That's fantastic.
We did that with who did we do it with, Mark?
Oh God, I can't
Stephen.
remember. Stuart Lee? No, who was it?
No, Stephen, the producer guy. Stephen, second name I've forgotten. Anyway.
Steve Wilson.
Steve Wilson. There you go.
Wilson. Yeah. We did. Absolutely right.
And he had Aardvark, so that's good. What have you got for in the Zeds or towards
the end? Is it ZZ Top? It must.
There you go.
It's Aardvark to ZZ Top. I claimed my £10. Give that man a pineapple. It's fantastic. Good for you.
That's very good work. So it also answers my next question, which is it alphabetical? Because it obviously is.
It is. It's alphabetical and then compilations.
Right. So, you're working in the record and tape exchange, and then you ended up roadieing for a band. Who were the band?
Yeah, band called Family Cat, who were kind of in that era of bands that was slightly before Britpop, so the same vintage as...
Who were quite big at one point. Were they supported by some quite significant people?
Yeah, they were supported by everyone who went on to be a lot more famous than they did.
Blur and people I can't remember.
Blur and Atomic Spin and PJ Harvey and White Town, the #1 single, and quite a lot. Yeah, but they played at Glastonbury and did a few TV things and a few Peel sessions. It just fell short.
And you were the roadie.
Yes, guitar tech, drum tech, humper.
What did you learn about roadieing from that experience?
I didn't want to do it forever. It's a tough life, and I got to a point where I thought, this isn't the thing I want to do forever. I don't even want to do it next week. And I stopped. Also, I didn't want to do it for anyone else, because it was, it was a band made up of my best friends, so I'd got the best seat in the house to watch them every night.
Right.
And I wasn't really interested in working for another band.
Yeah.
Were they aggrieved that they didn't make it and that everyone else who'd supported them did so well?
Well, they fell out quite badly towards the end, and so I think that was more of a problem than the lack of success.
It tells you something, doesn't it? Really, that the idea you sort of expect the Beatles to fall out eventually in the end, or the Eagles or whatever, but the idea that the Family Cat fall out as well at the end says something about bands.
All bands, but my theory is all bands are the same. They all have the same internal dynamic. There's always someone who's stolen someone else's girlfriend, someone who thinks they ought to have more songwriting credits. someone who's underappreciated. It always turns a bit miserable.
And when you're small, there's no escape. I mean, if you're Aerosmith, you can fly on different jets and only...
No, absolutely, you're stuck in the same van. Yeah.
So what did you do after roadieing?
So after roadieing, I was cycle couriering for a while.
Oh, wow. Right.
And then I got hired to work at XFM. Because there was a guy who'd done the sound for the Family Cat for a couple of tours, who'd also done the sound at the Mean Fiddler. And he started this little radio station called XFM, and he needed someone to help him out, and that someone turned out to be me.
Because we've been reminded of this in the last week, because both Mark and I have watched the XFM documentary, which is...
really interesting. Check out The Jams, the story of XFM.
And so this is when that you were hired then, Fraser?
So the XFM, if you've seen the documentary, you'll know that before it was XFM, it was a pirate called Q102 in East London.
Yeah.
It was around and about then. And then when Sammy did Festival FM in 1991, which was the RSL at the Reading Festival, I was involved with that, helping out. Weirdly enough, I was hired as a security guard.
I've never seen this side of you. I know, this is incredible.
And during the weekend...
I can recognise that in Heart Mother. You've got the job, sir. Yeah, go on.
During the weekend, when I was sleeping in the porter cabin, minding all the equipment, someone broke in and stole a bunch of CDs while I was asleep. Clearly not much of a security guard. Then the following year became the first London RSL. So that was 4 weeks in London in April of 1992. I was hired as kind of station assistant, which meant basically sleeping at the radio station. I'd be there I'd get up at 6 a.m., work through till 2 a.m. the following morning, sleep for 4 hours on the sofa, and get up and do it all over again, 7 days a week for 4 weeks.
And this was you eventually became head of music, didn't you? So how do you go from being a security guard to head of music?
Well, station assistant first of all.
Station assistant.
They'd given up on me security-wise by that point. They knew I couldn't do security, but I knew a lot about music, so that was kind of useful. So I think the head of music thing was a reward for all the hours I put in during the trial broadcasts. So when
what did that involve? Were you part of kind of sorting out the policy for the station?
Yeah, it was being involved in the playlisting, training of DJs, making sure that interviews were booked and that guests were looked after. Record company liaison, talking to the pluggers, all those kind of things.
Right.
And we should tell people that among the key presenters were Ricky Gervais, Stephen Merchant, Gary Crowley, Steve Lamacq, Claire Sturgis, and you were in charge of them, and you were to some extent encouraging them what they should or shouldn't play.
Yeah, I mean, right at the very end, it was interesting when Capital came over. Basically, there was a falling out between the guy who owned the station and the guy who there was a fallout in management, and right towards the end, Capital Radio came in. The adults weren't talking to each other, so somebody had to rescue it, and Capital did. Bought the station for a load of money, and the guy who was the station controller vanished pretty much. And so for a month, we had this very weird time when I was essentially in charge of the entire station. And so I took every DJ aside and said, look, you know what the situation here is. Capital are coming in. Every show you do is an audition, and you can either choose to audition or you can do whatever the hell you want, and I don't care one way or the other.
This is so Fraser.
Yeah, it is.
So you had some DJs going on there and playing Shiny Happy People by R.E.M. because I thought it was what Capital wanted.
Yeah, absolutely.
You had others going on the air and playing Capital Radio by The Clash.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Some form of sonic protest. And I didn't care one way or the other. And it was very entertaining because you had this really weird balance between people who were clearly desperate to have jobs and people who knew they weren't going to get them.
Yeah,
it really interests me, that whole thing about radio, because you can there are lots of parallels with magazines, but with magazines can write about a huge diversity of stuff, and people can just choose to turn the page or just stumble across it or whatever. But with radio, if you play a record on the radio, it's effectively, for those 3 or 4 minutes, it is the front cover of your radio station. And there's a lovely bit in the documentary where they all talk about Gary Crowley says he's not allowed to play Scritti Politti. And Steve Lamacq says he wants to play House of Pain by Jump Around by House of Pain, and I don't think he's allowed to either. And there's real issues about what you can and can't play. That's really interesting. Were you involved in those playlist debates then? You must have been.
I was, but I think the House of Pain example is interesting because I think that's more likely to be somebody who's in charge of the station not liking that particular record, because there was plenty of other stuff. We played a lot of dance music, we played Left Field and Prodigy and all those kind of things, which would have had the same impact if you'd been tuning in accidentally. You'd have gone, what is the station? You know, it wasn't wall-to-wall Oasis.
Yeah.
But you say in the film that you know, you talk about that they did a station at Knebworth, didn't they, when Oasis were doing their famous Knebworth stint, and you say actually, effectively at that point, it was already all over because.
Well,
Go on, tell us about that.
It felt like the end to me. I mean, I say this in the film, but it was a huge, enormous event, and it was amazing to be there. And the build-up over the previous few years to that moment had been amazing. I loved the fact that you could walk down Camden High Street and Oasis would be coming out of every shop. I think for a whole generation, it was our Beatlemania. Whether you really liked them or not, you couldn't escape their influence.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of peaked before Knebworth. And Knebworth felt a little bit tired to me and a little bit hackneyed. And, you know, you had the Creation Records people going to the venue by limousine, and you had this enormous great barn erected backstage with Kate Moss and Lenny Kravitz and everyone doing Mountains of Cocaine. And it kind of just felt like this wasn't what Creation were about, you know. And this certainly wasn't what XFM were about.
Right. But XFM, as the documentary makes plain, had the great bad fortune to be launched just after the death of Diana, Princess of Wales.
Yeah, she died the day before, didn't she?
She died the day before.
And there's a moment where they just...
Can you remember this, presumably? You were getting ready for the station to launch on the Monday, yes?
Yeah, well, I had a very long weekend that weekend. We'd have the Cure come in on the Friday before we launched to do like a takeover, which was testing the transmitter, that kind of thing. So it's 4 or 5 hours of Robert Smith DJing and the rest of the band coming in and out of the studio, and their tour manager was there and all that kind of stuff. And somebody had some brownies, which I thought, they're nice. So I had a couple, and it turned out to be hash cakes.
Oh, right. Okay.
And I got very, very stoned very, very quickly. I remember going home and waking up on Saturday morning and knowing I had to go back into work and clean up after the Cure, and just being racked with paranoia because this still had this stuff coursing through my system.
Yeah.
And then I went home on Saturday night, and of course, Diana died in the early hours of Sunday morning. And then on Monday, we were meant to launch.
Yeah.
So I did this weekend where I was wreckage. And then she died, and then we were on air. And Chris Parry composed a brief tribute, and then it was straight into the MC5 and Gary Crowley.
But the general feeling you get is that everyone thought, well, look, we're kind of alternative music. This is indie music. And our kind of people won't be remotely swayed by what's going on in the real world by Lady Di. And you had a £250,000 promotional campaign to help launch it. And actually that was proved wrong, wasn't it? That actually the whole country was completely wrong-footed and everybody was looking in a different direction. Yeah. Even kind of Supergrass fans or whatever.
And John Kennedy makes that point brilliantly in the film.
Yeah.
He says, "Who thought that, you know, Princess Diana was more popular than grunge?"
Yes, imagine that.
I know.
Yeah, while you're talking about Princess Diana, I can't let you escape without... You used to have a wonderful thing on your personal website years ago saying, "I'm Fraser Lewry, here are 20 things about me." And one of them was that I sent the Princess of Wales in the wrong direction or something. What was it? What was that story?
Well, this was when I was a cycle courier, and I was cycling down Marylebone High Street, and I was at traffic lights, and a red convertible Mercedes pulled up next to me, and the guy in the passenger seat said, "Excuse me, do you know where Marylebone Lane is?" And I looked across, and sitting in the driver's seat was Princess Diana. And I kind of panicked and thought, yeah, I know where Marylebone Lane is, and directed them to, 200 yards down there on the right. And of course, it was 400 yards down on the left. One direction.
But that wasn't deliberate.
No.
It wasn't deliberate.
It wasn't.
No. It wasn't malice.
So, yeah, the...
Have you got any...
Because also, the other thing about the week that XFM launched is Radio 1... went into playing instrumental music, didn't it? Do you remember this?
I don't remember that, no.
Oh, right. Well, I think they pretty
did.
much did this, yeah. They just we can't have lyrics. It was kind of wall to wall William
if you had
Orbit.
lyrics, they could be misinterpreted or whatever.
Absolutely.
So, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have any souvenirs of your XFM time?
Well, what I have is there's a load of still images that show up in the film, and they all come from a charity book. We had a guest book at the station. We had a pair of guest books, and people would come in and do interviews. We'd take the photograph, they'd sign a blank page in the book, and then later we'd insert the photographs once they were developed into the book.
Right.
One of the guest books was auctioned for charity, and for some reason I ended up with the other one. So this is the
right.
guest book.
Wow.
Which is lots of interesting things in it. Like, for instance, it's a rare photograph of Brett Anderson and Bernard Butler together.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
My particular favourite, which is myself and Robert Plant.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Oh, right.
Yeah, you forget it wasn't all just kind of, you had people like Robert Plant and Jimmy Page came in, didn't they? Didn't Bowie come in at one stage? Didn't you?
Bowie came in. I had a very nice
little office in the top of Charlotte Street. It's amazing.
He was doing an interview with, it was him interviewing Robert Smith, interviewing David Bowie. The two of them just having a conversation. My job was to record it. And when David Bowie came in to the room, I was setting up the equipment, and everyone else was kind of hanging around him, waiting to get introduced. And he noticed I hadn't been introduced and came over and said, "Hello, I'm David."
Oh, very good.
Oh,
what a gentleman.
That's a sweet thing to do.
I had a fresh tattoo. I could see the bandage on my arm. And he asked about that tattoo. And then he said, "Well, you want to see mine?" I was like, "Yes, please." And he pulled up his trousers, and he's got a dolphin tattooed on his calf.
Oh, amazing.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Fraser always gets the story, you see. Always gets
that's
the
good.
story.
So Robert signed it, "Be Happy, Robert Plant," which is nice.
Very good. Very good. Well, how was Ricky Gervais? Ricky Gervais had this kind of odd role at XFM.
Yeah, his job was something called head of speech. And even he doesn't have a clue what this was meant to mean. It was a completely kind of spurious, nominal thing, wasn't it?
Well, I worked with him for a year, and I don't know what he was meant to be doing. But he was brilliant at doing that thing that whatever it was he was doing. I think Sammy hired him because he knew he had something to offer. And, XFM didn't need a head of speech. It was a music-based radio station. If anything, we encourage the DJs not to speak.
Shut up.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you don't have anything to say, don't open the mic. And he was someone who just rabbited on and spoke nonsense non-stop. But he was very good at that. And he would go in on people's shows and try and make them laugh, try and make them read stuff that they should never read on air. I remember things like he was supposed to be on Claire Sturgis's show one afternoon, and instead I was rowing him around the Serpentine, and he was calling into the station on his mobile phone and broadcasting from the back of a boat.
You were rowing Ricky Gervais round the Serpentine.
That's good. That's great. Yeah. And he was doing it on his mobile from the boat.
Yes.
Brilliant.
He's in the film, and I give him points for this. He talks about when he was taken over by Capitol. Some people are very kind of bitter, and he says they gave me a check. It was far more than I was expecting. It's business. That's the way things are,
Yeah, because there's a real element with a lot of other people that it's a bit unfair, and the man's taken over, and it's kind of it's disloyal, and it's surrender, But the point is that it had a £1.7 million debt, didn't it? And Chris Parry, who partly owned it, obviously wanted to make some money. So, and very few people acknowledge that was, it was losing money. It's just a business venture.
Absolutely, and what I think was paid for the station was well over the odds. I think Capital Radio paid £15 million.
I'm sure. So you were there till the end of that?
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And what did you do after that?
So I basically I buggered off to the US and travelled around by Greyhound for a while, did a coast-to-coast journey by Greyhound, and then came back and decided I wanted to work on the internet. Because it seemed like the crazy place to be at that time, and got a job with an Italian MP3 download site who were based in Shoreditch and had a pan-European network of offices. They had offices in Milan and Madrid and Stockholm and Amsterdam and Paris and I think Munich, and spent a few years there, and gradually it turned into this awful job where it was different people in charge, and they were doing stuff that was borderline spam. At one point, I was running a pornography website for the 3 network, mobile network, uploading porn every day, and legal, but, but not very healthy.
Yeah.
And that was when the Word magazine came along.
Oh, really?
Did we know that wasn't on your CV when we interviewed you?
I can remember. I think you came our way via Rob Manuel. It must have been via Rob, was it? Via Rob?
It was either. Yeah, I think it probably was.
I think it was probably via Rob. Because also you ran, for your own amusement, you ran various little side projects like a website called Kitten Wars. Is that right?
Yeah, Kitten War is the one good idea I've had in my life.
Explain Kitten War for the benefit of anybody who doesn't know. Go on.
Who remembers Hot or Not? It was Hot or Not for cats, basically. So it was people were presented with 2 kittens, and you had to choose which one was cutest. And once you'd done that, it would tell you whether other people's choices agree with your own or not. And then you could see the cutest kittens and the ugliest kittens and all that kind of stuff. And it generated a buzz for a while. It got featured on the cover of the Metro and on the Daily Express. It got featured on the Stephen Colbert show a couple of times. And we got a book out of it, a book deal as well.
I remember that. You also wrote a brilliant thing about the A to Z of food, and you cooked an alphabetical list of really interesting things, quail quiche and yak and stuff. Was that for The Guardian? I can't remember.
The Observer, wasn't it?
A blog that you did. Was it The Observer?
Yeah, it was The Observer, published on the Guardian website, but it was for The Observer Food of Mouth column. And so that came out of doing blogging, where I'd made some odd things. I'd made like a Scotch ostrich egg, and I'd made Pepto-Bismol ice cream and things like that.
Fantastic. Did you start with Aardvark, if it's alphabetical, and end with ZZ Top? I don't know.
I started with ants.
Ants! Cooking ants! That's great.
And I finished, I think, with Zebra Wellington.
Oh, brilliant.
So you do set yourself projects, don't you, Fraser?
I do set myself projects, yeah.
Right.
I mean, I had another idea for a project which I offered to The Guardian, and they said, yes, we'd love you to do this. And it was making things you never make. So it was like making your own salt or making your own chewing gum. And I realized that by committing to this, I was basically volunteering to turn my flat into a chemistry lab for the foreseeable future for not very much financial reward. So at the end, I gracefully backed away from that idea.
Fraser's a great one for doing things the difficult way. I remember you went through a period, obviously being a New Zealander and a supporter of the All Blacks. I think you went to see the All Blacks playing at Twickenham, and you were living in Holloway, and you walked. Is that right?
You did. I remember that.
It became an annual event. The All Blacks would play at Twickenham at Christmas.
How many miles was that to walk to Twickenham?
It was a 4-hour walk, a 3.5-hour, 4-hour walk. Yeah.
So you don't do things the easy way.
No.
So right, you had your time at Word, which was kind of like XFM, but probably less colourful cast. Which is similar outcome, really, isn't it? But
I'm beginning to think it's my fault.
No, it's not your fault at all. But you must have enjoyed that, didn't you, Fraser? You don't have to.
I absolutely loved it. Yeah, I absolutely loved it.
Right. And what did you learn during your time running the Word website?
Again, that I never wanted to do that kind of work ever again.
Why not?
I need to learn to work in a way that doesn't require me to be on when I'm awake. So, I tend to, my thing, and it's a terrible habit, is I get up and I work, and then I go to bed.
Well, that's the problem with being a digital editor. You can't switch off. You can always see what's going on, can't you?
Yeah, and I'm getting better at that. I don't work as crazily hard nowadays as I did then. But it's still a thing. If someone emails me at 11 o'clock at night, I answer.
Yeah.
But it was a very exciting time, that. And that website, just that community that grew on that website, supporting Word, was a fantastic thing, really.
It was.
It is. So
I'm delighted that it's still going, even if I never revisit the website. It's like with XFM, I've never listened to it since the day I left.
No.
It's, I'm done.
One extra question about XFM, very quickly. Ricky Gervais and Stephen Merchant started writing in the office, didn't they? They started writing the rough drafts of what became the office. Yes. So when you saw the office, was there any element of that reminded you of things that might have happened at XFM, I guess?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean,
like what sort of things?
Well, David Brent is very clearly based on at least 2 people who worked at the XFM office, and maybe a third.
Oh, right.
There are things that happen in the office that I've seen in real life. There was in the episode called Appraisals, which is in series 2. There's a scene where Ricky Gervais or David Brent takes Lucy, the secretary, aside and reads her this awful, awful poem, and then to cover the terrible silence that follows, he picks up a beer bottle and blows across the lip with this forlorn, sad noise. And I saw someone do that at XFM, and Ricky was standing next to me.
Really? Amazing.
Fantastic.
Really interesting. It is. It's really interesting.
Have you ever bumped into him since?
I've seen him a couple of times. I ran into him in Soho, and he gave me a big hug, which was lovely. And then I went to a recording of his the Ricky Gervais show, which was the chat show he had for a while.
Right.
And I'll email him once a year, and he gets back within 30 seconds, which is nice.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. So was there ever any inkling at the time you thought, this guy will go somewhere?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the reason XFM was so important with Ricky was because beforehand he was the social manager at Ulu. So he was booking bands and looking after the bar and that kind of stuff. And I think XFM offered him a route into what he really wanted to do, which was being an entertainer.
Yeah,
and
right.
So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was the literal funniest man you've ever met.
Really?
Working with him was an absolute blast, yeah. And it's just so unpredictable.
So what are you doing now, Fraser? Tell everybody what you're doing.
So since 2014, I've been the online editor at Classic Rock Magazine. So in a way, this is going back to the 16-year-old me. You know, it's funny. It's when I started, it was reading Jeff Barton and Malcolm Dome and Dave Ling and all those people I'd read when I was 16. I was actually working with them, which is great. And you know, I've got to interview some of the bands that I loved when I was 16 or 17, which has been nice as well.
But you started off doing that in London, obviously, for a number of years.
Yeah, I did it for a few years in London, and then I'd been thinking about moving back to New Zealand for a while. In 2017, I came back and decided, I'm going to move. So I went back to London for a little while longer. I was looking at house prices here and that kind of stuff. And then I told my bosses at Classic Rock that I wanted to move, and they said, well, take your job with you. And it's worked out to everyone's
That's worked out well, has it?
Yeah, I mean, it's worked out for me in the sense that I had a really soft landing. I didn't have to worry about work when I got here. And it's worked out for them because when Taylor Hawkins dies in the middle of the night, I'm awake and I can get a story up while they're all still asleep.
Oh, of course.
Yes.
Of course.
So it works. Yeah, I can see that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So you keep
more around the clock than it ever was.
Yeah. So whereabouts are you in New Zealand? Are you in the throbbing heart of rock and roll New Zealand? Or I guess you're not, Fraser.
I'm just about as far from the rocking heart of rock and roll in New Zealand as you can get. I'm in a tiny little town called Oamaru, which is on the South Island, about 125 miles north of Dunedin, 125 kilometres north of Dunedin, which is a town of about 13,000 overlooking the sea. I think there's been a few gigs here since I've got here, but there aren't many. It's because, I've gone from going out 4 nights a week to getting on a plane and flying 3 hours to go to a gig just because of something on,
What sort of things have you flown 3 hours to see?
Well, not 3 hours, but an hour. So I've flown to Auckland for gigs before. I was supposed to go up to see Sugar Ross a couple of months ago, but that got cancelled. Yeah. I flew up to see Wet Leg play in Auckland.
Oh, brilliant!
So how do your neighbours look upon you? You know, that chap who's moved in at number 13. He's the online editor of Classic Rock Magazine.
Well, I think I'm about to find out because the local paper suddenly discovered that they have this celebrity amongst their midst to interview. So come Friday, there's going to be a spread apparently in the Oamaru Mail.
The Oamaru Mail.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Is this based on your time at XFM? Because of the documentary?
Yeah, it is.
Right.
The
So
start small.
So what? You got something else to show us? I think you managed to you went through the attic and
Yeah. I don't know where all my stuff has gone. I used to have a box of tat, which was things I'd accumulated over the years, and I couldn't find any of that stuff. But I did find a copy of the Daily Star from the December the 10th, 1980, which is the coverage of John Lennon's death.
Oh, I remember all those papers so vividly. I've got a few of those in the room.
Do you know the weird thing about that cover is it looks like the cover of the NME.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? It's really quite sober. Yeah.
White border.
I don't know why I've kept this. I mean, I know he's dead. It's not news anymore. What's interesting is I was looking at the prices of stuff. Lambert and Butler, 67 pence.
There you go. There you go.
Now it's £11.20. That's a 1,500% increase.
You see, this is the great thing, Fraser. I was only writing something about this week. I was writing about something about spending time in the British Library, going through old, bound volumes of the NME or Sound or whatever. And these things are literally falling apart. They're turning to powder in your hand. Because also they're so frequently consulted. People are using them all the time. Far more than they're using copies of the Daily Telegraph or whatever.
You don't give them gloves to wear?
No, not as yet.
Can't they scan them, or are there just too much of them?
Well, I asked somebody about this. I mean, A, there's a massive amount of them. And B, if you're the British Library, you have a backlog of things that you have to digitise, which is miles long. You know what I mean? You've got loads of local newspapers and I don't know, whatever to do. Anyway, but the point is that if you read an old copy of the NME or any of these things, you don't just read the thing you've set out to read. You read all the things around it. You read context at the same time as you
look at the ads. Exactly.
And that is something that has disappeared from our lives. Because you don't do that with the internet, do you, Fraser? You can't do that.
I also think you don't do it with modern newspapers. You kind of know where the ads are and you ignore them. Whereas with an old newspaper, you look at them because they appear more interesting.
Also, there's very few ads in modern newspapers.
But also, there are very few ads, but also they're not price specific as they used to be. When Tesco wanted to tell you that their beans were cheaper, they took a page in the Daily Star to tell you. Whereas, they won't do that anymore. And so price, as you say, your Lambert and Butler, which were how much? Well, less than £1, is that right?
67p.
7p.
And I mean, how much is a packet of cigarettes nowadays? It's unbelievable.
£11.20.
You say that with knowledge. Go on.
Entire page of Lonely Hearts.
Oh, right.
Oh, wonderful.
Has it got, if you look in the old Smash Hits used to have a Pen Pals section.
Yeah.
Which was kind of Lonely Hearts. I can't even think about this nowadays.
It was.
Where 14-year-olds would write in with their postal address. And we would publish it.
Yeah, and they would say, "Oh, yeah, I'm 14 and really into the Cure and the Blow Monkeys or whatever. This is where I live.
I live at 6 railway cuttings.
I know.
It's absolutely astonishing. Yeah. So Fraser, we traditionally climax these chats by asking people to tell us, because we're in a worldwide quest to find out what is the greatest record ever made. And we've had answers, but none of them satisfactory, I think. That's
none of them so far correct.
And so
we're still looking. We think that you, possibly, may be the source of the right answer.
Yeah.
Well, I will preface this by saying that my record collection is appalling. I tend to favour curios over classics, so I'm the kind of idiot who doesn't own any Nick Drake albums, but has the Molly Drake album.
Oh my God, that's brilliant!
And I know that Nick Drake is much better than Molly Drake. I get that.
Yeah.
For some reason, I buy Molly. So with that in mind, I have a record by a band called Idlewild South.
Oh right, I know.
They're named after the second Allman Brothers band album.
Yeah,
right,
true.
Yeah.
They're called. The album's called Keep On Truckin'. It's got tracks on like My Daddy, Days of Boogie, and Song for Dwayne.
Of course, very Allmans.
They're Japanese.
Oh,
The
fantastic.
Japanese Allman Brothers tribute group.
That's great.
Only Fraser Lewry
Yeah.
would have that record.
Yeah.
I know very little about this band. I know that they supported Lynyrd Skynyrd on tour in Japan in 1977. But my favourite thing about this album is at the bottom, it says
Macon,
Georgia.
Now, I'd love to know whether they ever made it to Macon. I'd love to know whether one of them died in a motorcycle accident. But it's just a terrific record and quite authentic, as you'd expect.
What are they called again?
Idlewild South.
Idlewild South. That's brilliant.
That's fantastic.
That's so good.
That's from the
That's been a lot of fun.
That's from the man who once said to me, when he said, Fraser's well known for being a gourmet. Fraser's the only person I know who'd save up and go for fantastic meals, you know, that you, once in a lifetime, and also a wonderful cook, and you know. But Fraser used to, his proud claim was, "My body is a sewer."
That's right.
My taste in music is a bit like my taste in food. I like everything, so I like all food and I like all music. You know, I haven't met a kind of music I didn't like.
Very good. We'll finish there.